A record low amount of players were taken in the AFL National Draft over the course of the last two nights. Only 60 players drafted, two of them relisted. There were bolters, there were sliders, there were father-sons, there were academies, there were curiosities, and there were all sorts of surprises. To put the full stop on it is Benny Waterworth, who's back with us, our draft expert from Fox Footy. Benny, thanks for getting up early, mate, and doing the work, to borrow a phrase.
Yes, how appropriate on a Friday to be saying that, Sammy. Yes, hello to you and Coon. You mentioned that was a low amount of picks, 60. It's probably slightly more than I thought there was going to be. I thought there was going to be closer to 55, but maybe I think that the fact that a few club-tied bids came a little bit later on, maybe just saw a few more list spots taken up.
All right, let's start with some questions that some people have got. Daniel texted in before you joined us, Benny, wanting to know what on earth is happening with the Adelaide Crows. Their needs midfielders, says Daniel, and during the trade and the draft, they've picked three key forwards when they already have what they've got. Have you got a line of sight on maybe what the Crows were thinking, and were you surprised?
So the information I got, Sammy, at their first pick of the night, on night one, was they were weighing up between Mitch Marsh and Archie Ludowick. So they took Mitch Marsh, which was, I think, the logical pick in terms of the homegrown talent. You know, his dad obviously played for the club, but he's also, potentially a Tex Walker replacement down the track. They get on the clock last night, and Archie Ludowick is still on the board. And Ludowick, I think, was being talked about as a potential first rounder, not only to Adelaide, but even as early as the Giants, even as Geelong. Yeah. He somehow slips all the way to there. So I think that mail was good in terms of the Crows clearly had some interest in Archie at that first pick, and they get to him a little bit later on. So it does feel like, though, from a listening perspective, that they might have gone forward too many and could have gone another midfielder, particularly when there were so many midfielders quality midfielders that have been sort of left on the table. So I can understand the perplexity around that, but the context is, I think, they really, really liked Archie Ludowick and thought he got too far down the order. Yeah,
so take the best player, not necessarily what the needs would demand. Yep. And then there's Port Adelaide, who sought to explain their situation last night. They had a pretty busy mid-season period. There's an upgrading going on as well, and they've obviously got 3 picks in the rookie draft coming up this afternoon. But 11 of them in the war room, Benny, over the course of the 2 nights, and they just engineered a little pick swap with Gold Coast, and it was job done.
Yes, I think they were enjoying the sliders, enjoying the party pies and sausage rolls last night, Sammy, and rightly so. They had to be there, so they make the most of it. No, I think, from what I understand, Port Adelaide did the work in terms of in the lead up to the draft. They put time and effort into a group of players that they were keen to acquire. Should they get a pick? Obviously, their first pick that they were supposed to have going into the draft was traded out to the Gold Coast Suns. The Suns used that pick to help them match bids. So the Power got on the clock pretty late in the draft, and from what I understand, all of their players that they were thinking about taking or hopeful of taking were off the board by the time that happened. So that just has led to them upgrading rookies and not picking the draft, which is a little bit jarring and unprecedented that a club wouldn't take a player at the national draft.
So, I mean, everyone's been up in arms about this Gold Coast situation. They get Christian Petrarca in this year, and they end up with the amount of kids that they brought in. So, do we have to factor in that they lost Lukosius and then you had to burn that pick to get some of those academy kids in, right? I mean, that's part of the situation, and also we've got to remember that's the deal that Port Adelaide did to get Lukosius to the club 12 months ago.
Yeah, 100%. This is a fascinating discussion, right? That needs a lot of nuance and balance, because Lukosius last year, but they worked hard during the off season in terms of getting rid of a lot of players to rival clubs in Ainsworth and Flanders and Fiorini was a free agent, but this has been a real, I don't know about you, Sally, but I can't remember a list turnover quite like it from a club in recent times, and so I came into the draft thinking it was doubtful that they were going to get all 5 of their top academy guys. I thought they were going to get 4, and that Bo Adamsaw would probably slip to a rival club. But they did a lot of trading 2 nights ago now to ensure that they got Bo Adamsaw on their books. So, and on top of that, they traded back in to last night's draft to get Avery Thomas, the top Tasmanian prospect, who was a cracking character. Clubs really fell in love with with his story. So yeah, as a sort of that third key defender, the Suns traded back in last night and able to get the third key defender as well. So yeah, I understand on paper it's quite a jarring experience that Gold Coast can reach the semi-final stage, bring in Christian Petrarca, and then bring in 5 academy prospects.
Yeah, but I mean, it's lost some Lukosius, Ainsworth, Flanders, and trading back in to get Avery as well. So it has cost them a bit. It hasn't been all just free picking for the Gold Coast Suns. I think we should factor that in as well. But where does it leave them now for the next sort of year or two in terms of their draft hand?
Yeah, so my understanding is that their prospects, their academy prospects for the next certainly next year and even the year after that aren't as strong. So the Suns have put a lot of effort into this year's draft. You talked about the Lukosius trade beforehand. 12 months ago, they traded a lot of picks into this year's draft, knowing that this was going to be a strong crop, and that's how it's worked out.
Yeah.
And a lot of future picks that they had heading into this draft in terms of 2026 and 27 picks, they were also not with them now. So they've targeted this draft knowing that it was strong, and it's worked out really, really well for them.
Yeah, and it's the opposite to Port Adelaide, who obviously only had 49 and 85, I think, after the trade period. They used some picks in the Corey Durden situation. They used some picks. This year's first, they lost in that Jack Lukosius deal as well, Joe Richards and Dan Houston. So that's why that is, and that's a big year next year coming up for them with Doug Cochran, of course. So they're planning for that. Ben, a lot of questions coming through here on Ollie Greaves, who was, I think, in just about every Phantom draft you cared to open throughout the course here, particularly early on, right at the pointy end. Now, what's happened here to lead to the fact that he's been completely overlooked?
So we had Ollie Greaves at, I think, 18 on our Fox Sports rankings last night. I certainly had him in the teens as well in my top 50 because he had put together an extremely impressive 2025 campaign. He barely played a bad game. He was Vic Metro's MVP, high up in the leadership group there. He was an All-Australian. Co-captain of the Eastern Rangers premiership side. He's a big-bodied midfielder who gets a lot of the ball and showed throughout the year that he can also hit the scoreboard. And he didn't go in the draft last night. So it goes to show the nature of this year's draft, how it's so polarising. And I think clubs can go into this draft with looking at prospects with a glass half empty case, just because of potentially the lack of depth in this year's draft. The question marks on Ollie Greaves heading into this draft was around his defensive transition and how hard he worked back to support his teammates, and I think that's been communicated to Ollie throughout the year. The other thing is how high was his ceiling at AFL level, which is often a discussion around inside midfielders in the modern game. It was a discussion even I heard you talking about Dyson Sharp-Coons yesterday. That isn't a discussion around Dyson Sharp, and maybe a reason why he slipped to Essendon's third pick is what is his ceiling at AFL level as an inside midfielder? I think he had more upside than Ollie Greaves. So Greaves is a rookie chance. Greaves is a rookie chance today, but it was quite a shock when he was left on the draft board last night.
Only 2 father-sons picked up on night 2. Charlie Banfield, former number 1 draft pick Drew's son, bid not matched by West Coast, so he went to St Kilda. Will Darcy went to the Dogs with the last pick of the night. So great to see those 2 guys get an opportunity. But one who did miss out was Tom McGuan, who had a pretty good year and was touted as possibly a top 10 pick 12 months ago. Collingwood passed on that and didn't end up getting an opportunity. Will we see him on a rookie list possibly today?
I think it's a good chance. Collingwood did say last night, so they got 1 rookie list spot today, and they said that they were weighing up between Tom and their next generation academy prospect, Jai Saxena. And Jai was, as a player that sort of really come on this year, had a really good start to the year, but maybe dropped off. Whereas McGuan, has been the consistent player right throughout. He's been stuffing the stat sheets for the Western Jets, and obviously played for Vic Metro as well. So this has been a big talking point, particularly amongst fans as well, that, Tom McGuan, the son of the great Mick McGuan, the Premiership Magpie, wasn't nominated for the national draft under the father-son rule. So the Pies will be weighing up the decision. I don't have a line of sight on which way they'll go. The romantic pick would be McGuan, but Saxena, I think, is seen as someone who has a good potential at AFL level. So I'm fascinated to see how that plays out today.
One other one, Benny, before we let you go. I'm not sure how surprised you were by this, but the Sydney Swans taking the best and fairest out of the SANFL, the mature age, I think he's from Norwood, Billy Cooney. I'm not sure many people saw that one coming, did they?
I won't lie, Sam. When that pick went last night, I did have to Google him. I didn't have a lot of idea about Bill. I'd heard the name, but I didn't know sort of too much about his journey. I knew that he was a mature age pick as well. But this is the draft, right? This is think Lawson, the Lawson Humphreys pick. This is the Swans doing, a lot of background work, and trying to find a diamond in the rough in the 40s, and they'll be hoping that this is their guy and that he can help them succeed going into the future.
Yep, I think he played Essendon VFL back in the day as well.
He
so
did.
yeah, Benny, you've been all over it, mate. Your knowledge is really impressive, I have to say. Thanks so much for joining us and educating Adam and myself over the course of the last 2 days. You've had a massive couple of days, mate. You'll sleep well this weekend. We appreciate it.
No, I appreciate the support, guys. Have a good day.
Mick, firstly, congratulations with your work over the last 2 nights on Fox. It was a tough gig, but you did a terrific job.
Morning, Whitey, and thank you very much, mate. I appreciate those comments and obviously the support of yourself and the broader SEN group. It's been an amazing couple of nights, as always. Lots of dreams have come true, some obviously tough nights for other kids, but as we said, mate, there's plenty of opportunity yet to come with the rookie draft, SSP, mid-season draft, so just encourage these young fellas to hang in there. But what an amazing couple of nights.
Now, don't get ahead of yourself because you've got a lot of tough questions to answer over the next 15 minutes based on the messages that are coming through off our temper text. But just as a general understanding, the lowest amount of picks last night in the history of the draft, just 60. I guess the simple question is why?
Yeah, it is. It's just drafting's being done differently, and this is something I don't think that we've, as an industry, that we've explained and touched on well enough. It's now being broken up. So I just mentioned the SSP. I mentioned, obviously, the mid-season draft. So the numbers are still the same. It's just they're not as high at the national draft. We've got clubs leaving spots open on their list to have train-ons over the pre-season period and potentially get a little bit more of a look at some guys they weren't 100% sure on. They'll go back to the drawing board now and they'll have a look across state leagues. They'll have a look at kids that were overlooked, which, like I said, there was a number of top-end prospects overlooked for one reason or another. And they'll build their list out that way. So what I did find astonishing was for the first time in draft history, a club didn't make a selection, and that was the Port Adelaide Footy Club.
So why did that happen, Mick? Because I know they don't have a lot of list spaces available. That's obvious. Otherwise, they would have taken picks. But considering that South Australia won the Under-18 championships for the first time in a very long time, so they had some really good players, that they didn't even get tempted by taking some local players.
Yeah, they're obviously happy with where their list's at, and they've recommitted to a couple of rookies already. So I'm led to believe that there's 2 players that they've recommitted to, and then they'll leave one spot open to potentially upgrade someone or to bring someone in, as I mentioned, over the pre-season period or even in the mid-season draft later on in 2026.
Okay. So in your view, who are some of the clubs that were big winners? And I know it's a really difficult question to ask because none of them have played yet. So I understand that. But based on what you've seen from them as junior footballers, a couple of clubs that you thought did extremely well.
Yeah, it's generally the obvious ones, Whitey, and people will sit there and go, oh, well, it's not hard to pick in the top 10 and the like. But, obviously the West Coast Eagles, I made it clear my thoughts and my beliefs that this could be a decade-defining draft for the West Coast Eagles, and I think they got it right. I loved how aggressive they were in their bidding. They made, the Gold Coast Suns, the Carlton Footy Club pay full value for their academy prospects and Harry Dean as a father-son. I then thought they got their selections right, and they've started to build out their list a little bit, which was pleasing. I also thought the Essendon Football Club, and being an Essendon supporter myself, Whitey, we haven't had a great deal to cheer about for quite some time, but I thought this draft they got it right. I really did. They've to pick up what was originally pick 9 from the Carlton Footy Club, who needed to acquire points for Harry Dean, to get a guy like Dyson Sharp through at what turned out to be pick 13, was exceptional. They got Sullivan Roby in, who's going to be a really exciting player to watch. So I thought the Bombers did well. I thought they were one of the big winners, and clearly the Gold Coast Suns. I mean, to acquire enough points and to work their system well enough to bring in 5 academy prospects, which is unheard of. And for those young men to be able to remain in Queensland, I think is a big tick for what the academies were set up for, and a huge win for the Gold Coast Suns.
Mick, I heard you talking about the Gold Coast situation over the last couple of nights. So I kind of know where you stand on things, but I was talking about this yesterday afternoon on SEN. It sat uncomfortably with me that Gold Coast could have picks 14, 18, 24, 28, 33, 35 and 36 and turn those into 2, 5, 17 and 18. It felt that was... I don't quite know how that's allowed to happen. Because if you had those picks, 14, 18, 24, 28, 33, 35 and 36, and went to a club and said, we'll give you all those for 2, 5, 17 and 18, there's no chance they'd do that.
No, and I understand the reaction. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I do look at it through a slightly different lens, but I can understand and respect the passion of yourself and the broader football community that got their arms up in the air questioning, how does this happen? And it does need to be tweaked, and I'm sure Greg Swan's the right man to look at that and make some adjustments going forward. But having said that, and this is no disrespect to any kids coming through, but the group of Gold Coast Suns Academy players coming through in the next 2 years isn't as strong as what it's been 2 years ago when we saw Jed Walter and the like come through. We had Leo Lombard last year. But we're not going to see this in 2026 and 2027 from the Gold Coast Suns. They've made a point of bringing a lot of their picks forward. They've traded future picks to be able to do what they did at this draft. And like I said, I understand it doesn't sit well with people. I'm the first one to say we need to look at it. Having said that, when you look overall at the amount of bids that were placed, 20 out of the 60 selections were bid players. 5 of those weren't matched. So we've got 5 players that have gone into the football landscape far better prepared than what they would have been had they not been aligned to clubs through NGA or Northern Academies. And like I mentioned on night one, we were still largely underrepresented from a Queensland and New South Wales perspective in terms of numbers on AFL lists. Obviously, that's jumped up significantly over the last couple of days.
Yep, okay. That's a good explanation. Mick Ablett joining us on the Captain's Run on SEN on this Friday morning. So some questions coming through from our audience, and there's a few that are talking about the Hawks and the fact that they picked up 3 players from Central Districts. Was that just by accident, a coincidence, or was there a bit of strategy around that?
I wouldn't have thought anything was done by Mark McKenzie, who's the list manager at the Hawks. Nothing was done by chance, and it would have been a calculated move. Mark's actually a South Australian himself. He was a champion player over there in the SANFL, and he would have his roots embedded deeply in what's happening in that state. They had a really strong year. We know that. We saw that they dominated the under-18 championships. And if you look at what the Brisbane Lions did back in around about 2016, they brought in a cohort of Vic Country players to build around, and that's Hugh McCluggage, Jared Berry and the like. Yep. We've seen West Coast in this particular draft have gone down a similar path with Victorian players as well. So, you know, Hawthorn have chosen to go with the South Australian contingent. And when you bring players in that enjoy playing football together, enjoy being around each other, I think it bodes really well, and it just helps you build your core group out a little bit further.
The Tigers, a lot of supporters texting in, wanting to know, did they do the right thing by not taking Sullivan Roby, and just that whole strategy around how Richmond went through the draft?
Yeah, look, it was such an even pool, and that's what we saw. And I know there was a little bit of discussion around, you know, the numbers even being invited on night one were lower than what they had been in previous years. But each of those clubs, Richmond, Melbourne, Essendon, had the same group in mind. It was just a matter of what order they fell. And you go back to Sam Grill, he was probably the surprise packet. I think that threw a little bit of chaos in and was a bit unexpected, but he's the replacement for the Nick Gloucester, Nathan Broad type that can win the ball back, counter-attack off half-back. Bit of Jordan Clark about him, Sam Grill. So he certainly, threw a bit of a spanner in the works. And they also went with Sam Cumming, who was, the medium-sized midfielder, a little bit of John Newcomb type about him, an All-Australian, beautiful athletic profile. So they've gone for another mid and a half back. So they've rounded out their list and were able to pick a need early, which is rare to say.
Yes.
But, after what they did in 2024, they put themselves in a position to do that this year.
A lot of texts coming through. Again, fire them through 0433 98 11 16 off the 40 Winks temper text. I think there's a lot of people this morning feeling sorry for Ollie Greaves, considering the fact that on the Fox Lab, I think he was rated 17th or something like that, and he didn't get picked up. There's obviously a rookie draft, and as you said, there's even other opportunities, other avenues for him to get onto an AFL list. Did it surprise you that he wasn't picked up last night?
100%. Yeah, I am, and I say this genuinely, Whitey, I am gutted for Ollie Greaves. To be on draft boards and phantom drafts and stuff for, months now, and Noah Hibbins-Hargraves could sit in the same basket, but you got to feel for both those young men, and I'm absolutely gutted for them. But they'll be hurting for a couple of days. I've got no doubt they will get an opportunity. And Hawthorn tried to get Ollie Greaves through their NGA program and applied to get him in through his Indigenous heritage. Unfortunately, they weren't successful, but there'd be no better person to reach out to Ollie Greaves today than Sam Mitchell. If you look at a guy that, had his doubters and a similar type of player to what Ollie is and had to do it the hard way. I touched on it over the course of the last couple of nights. A guy like Matt Prittis, who went to 3 state combines before he was rookie listed and given his opportunity. But look, it doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter what anybody says. He'll be absolutely shattered this morning. I just hope he can pick himself up, get some good people around him, and I think we're all going to be watching his career with great interest going forward.
Absolutely. Again, just going through some of I'm trying to get to as many as I can, and which is impossible, but I'm trying to group them into categories to ask Mick. Tom McGuan from Collingwood. This was a story that kind of emerged a couple of weeks ago that the Magpies weren't going to take Tom as a father-son. Mick McGuan wrote a fantastic article in the Herald Sun just talking about the pain of being, finding that information out, but also the way that Tom responded so positively and got back on the bike and was at Collingwood training the next night. Do you think he'll get rookied?
Yeah, it's always sad, isn't it? I mean, people think father-sons have got a leg up, Whitey, but in a lot of cases, the pressure is big enough on these young men, let alone trying to follow in the footsteps of someone like Mick McGuan, who is an absolute star of the game, a premiership player at Collingwood. But the resilience is huge, and I've got no doubt Tom McGuan will bounce back. I think he's got a lot to offer. Don't be surprised if you do see him bob up on a rookie list. There's enough talent there. He reads the game really well. He's got a great football brain and a nice athletic profile as well. He tested in the top 5 in the 20-metre sprint, the agility and the 2K time trial. So as nice as it was to see Will Darcy taken with the final pick in the draft last night and to get his moment in the sun, for someone like Tom McGuan, and it must be really, really challenging for someone like him to have to sit back and watch all that unfold. But these are the guys that I love and I love following because, those stories that are built on resilience and hard knocks can often be the most rewarding down the track.
Yeah, absolutely. And we spoke to Sullivan Roby yesterday and talked about how it probably wasn't until he got delisted from his initial under-18 club that he really sort of, the fire started to burn and the determination kind of came through. And if that didn't happen, he might not be in the position he's in. So there's so many examples of that. And if there are young men listening to SEN today that did miss out, it's absolutely not the end. There's so many opportunities still. And we've just got so many examples to prove that point.
Yeah, there is, and I'll touch on it again for everybody out there. I've been fortunate enough to get close to Matt Priddis over the last couple of years, who's one of the most outstanding humans I've come across. And I had him talk to a group of young people just through my workplace in the last couple of weeks, and I didn't realise for the first 4 years of his career, after having to wait for his opportunity, he was on a 1-year contract every year. Finished fourth in a best and fairest, thought he might get a 2-year contract, rocked in. No, back on a 1-year deal. So, and turns out to be a Brownlow medalist. So this is why I'm so passionate about the AFL investing in state league competitions and recognising the importance and the role that they play, because we've got to get these young men back in the system. We've got to get them playing state league football. Often is the case, the stories of the Tim Kellys, the Marlon Pickett's, Sean Manor, another great example of someone that was able to go back and ply their trade at state league level and get an opportunity later on.
And you give the Matt Priddis example. I mean, Dane Zorko's another one that took a lot of convincing for him to get onto an AFL list, and now he's a 3-time premiership player, All-Australian. So there's lots of examples of that. A lot of passionate Melbourne supporters, Mick, have texted in on the Temper text 0433 98 11 16, wanting to know your thoughts on their two first selections, and also where Cooney White fits in now as a father-son.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, that's 3 years in a row that the Melbourne Footy Club have had 2 first-round draft picks. And I made the comment on the coverage on Fox Footy that Tim Lamb and Jason Taylor haven't got too many wrong over their time, and they've got another 2 first-rounders moving forward. So, I don't think they're in a rebuild phase. There's clearly been a line drawn in the sand by Stephen King, and he's obviously gone for character in terms of what they're chasing, the Melbourne Footy Club. And when it comes to Cooney White, there's a commitment there, I believe, to select him through the rookie list, and which is exciting. He's literally like watching Jeff play. So a really athletic type and very, very raw still. But I don't think they're in a rebuild phase. I just think they're in a bit of a regenerating phase of their list, and I think they could bounce pretty quickly over the next couple of years.
All right, I hope that answers a lot of you that have texted in about the Demons. James Magner's listening, the former Demon. He has texted in to say, I missed 6 drafts. Every year I missed it, it provided me with more motivation. Perseverance is the key. Thank you to James for texting in. And I think Hawthorn showed some sense of humour a few years ago when they picked up Mitchell Lewis, the year that they delisted Mitchell and Lewis, I thought. And obviously Mitchell's become a very handy player at the Hawks. But they almost did it again yesterday by picking an absolute clone, it looked like, of Zach Merritt.
Yeah, remarkable, wasn't it? I literally had that written on my piece of paper. And Shifter and I, for everyone out there listening, we don't collude or collaborate or anything like that. It's just when you see a player move, and they show certain attributes, you just get this likeness to an AFL type. And I had to have a bit of a chuckle myself when I looked down at the paper and saw I had plays like Zach Merritt. They clearly wanted that type of accumulator, that high possession winner that could add to the midfield, nice turn of speed, and they certainly got that, and they just got a younger version.
They did. And just very quickly to finish, because we've got to go, Sam Darcy, the reason why he was so late in the draft, because the thought is that he's a good player. Will Darcy, sorry.
Yeah,
Will Darcy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, he's just raw. He's not quite as mature in terms of his football development as what Sam was at the same time, but he's got very, very similar attributes. His loose ball hands, Waddy, are absolutely elite. I mean, you're talking about a kid that's just shy of 200 centimetres that takes a ball at ground level like a midfielder. So, I'm interested to see how they develop him, where he plays. I sort of see him as an intercepting tall defender, to be honest. I just think his ability to read, the ball in flight and understand patterns of play, I think is exceptional. So if they can build their footy club around Sam Darcy up front and Will Darcy down in the back half, there's a lot to be excited about for Western Bulldogs supporters in the future.
Hey, Mick, thank you for your time today. I know I didn't answer everyone's questions, but that would be impossible with the amount of texts that are coming through. But not only thank you for today, but over the last 4 or 5 weeks on a Friday, you've been fantastic for our listeners, previewing the draft and all the players, and then obviously with what you've done today. So many thanks.
Thanks to yourself, mate, and to the listeners and the engagement, the feedback, and to the SEN group. I've thoroughly enjoyed it and appreciate everyone's time.